People who ran into the weird kid from school years later, how did he or she turn out? I've told this before, but my dad told me about a kid he went to high school with who used to sit in the back of the class mumbling and giggling to himself all the time. Occasionally he'd pick his nose and eat the results. Despite this, my dad said, he was apparently really smart and got all A's. He told me the guy's name, and since it was pretty distinctive, I looked him up online. He was a federal appeals court judge. He is so much happier than he was in high school where people would physically assault him, harass him and mock him. He has autism and is obsessed with Batman and sharks. The last time I saw him was 2 years ago when I was walking around my friend's college and he was delighted to see me and even remembered my name where we caught up and he told me all about how he had been on vacation and got to go out on a boat and see sharks. He renamed himself Green Dragon of the West. He's a network engineer, so okay I guess. Ran into him at a Costco, wrapping up a PhD at 25. Not bad at all. There was a girl at my school who I will call Melanie. Melanie was easily the most socially awkward unaware girl I've ever met. Like, masturbating at school awkward, picking her nose and eating it publicly awkward. By the end of high school, she had figured out how to not do these insane things that made people stare and laugh at her. But needless to say, she had a rough go. But she was also one of those people who was a really nice, genuine person. I moved away after college and didn't have FB until at least 10 years after graduation, so I had no idea what most of my classmates were doing. Maybe 5 years ago, I spotted her and friended her. She ended up marrying this guy who went to our school and was maybe 3 years older than us. I knew him from work and he asked me out at one point. He was also really nice, but super nerdy and socially awkward. I didn't think about it at the time, but when I saw she married him, I was like, oh my god, they're perfect for each other. They moved to a state that has a bunch of mountains and they don't have any children. So they're always posting all these amazing hiking and rock climbing adventures they're doing together. They go to all kinds of festivals together. Renaissance, I think. Star Trek, horror, etc. They look super happy and I talked to her grandma last year, who told me they're happy as clams. I'm just so happy for her. He discovered that he was better at interacting with computers than with people and became a software engineer. He is still in jail for taking a prostitute out to the woods behind his parents' house and trying to kill her. He left her for dead but she came to after he left and got the hell out of there. I wouldn't say I ran into him but I occasionally drive past the penny kid walking around slumped in a leather jacket and greasy hair on a hot summer day. I really have no idea what he's doing with his life but he still seems pretty weird. Back in high school he was always collecting change that he'd find on the ground and I found out later he actually saved up $500 or so and donated it to charity. I thought a lot differently about him once I found out. There was a weird kid in my middle school who would eat hand sanitizer, cut his fingers and write 666 on the classroom walls with his blood, and other creepy things. Apparently, he had a crush on me and asked me to the 8th grade prom but I declined. Fast forward to the last day of middle school. I receive a message from him on Facebook saying he had a huge crush on me and that he would kill himself if I didn't feel the same. I told him that despite what he had just sent me, I wasn't interested. A few months later we start high school, but since there's 4 high schools in my area, a lot of us were scattered around and we ended up going to different schools. I never saw him again, but through Facebook I saw that he started a relationship with a girl that also attended our middle school. He looked really happy, and honestly I was happy for him. He seemed to have grown out of that weird middle school stage and genuinely seemed like a great guy. Around 2 years later, I was a junior in HS. I go to a local supermarket and just mind my business. The next day I receive a message from him on Facebook saying he was working at the supermarket and happened to see me. I messaged him back and apologized for not seeing him and saying hi. He then proceeded to apologize for all the weird middle school stuff and that message he had sent me on the last day of 8th grade. I told him all was fine and we left it at that. Now, by the looks of Facebook, he's a workout fanatic and his body has changed a lot. He also seems to be going to college and spends a lot of time with his family. I'm glad he's doing fine. I saw her at a con I was working, where she came up to my guest and was telling him about her book that she hadn't started writing but was due the next day and still had 10,000 words left to write. She also kept looking at her phone and dramatically sighing and saying things about how she wished her publisher would leave her alone. So still making up things to try and make herself look better. Still seems about the same. Natural dislike to anyone who tries to talk to him. Assumes everyone is out to get him. He's also put on about 100 pounds and he wasn't a small guy to begin with. He committed suicide before it ever got to years later. Just a few years after high school. I was glad we had been friendly and I had never been unkind to him. His family situation was horrendous and he couldn't escape the damage. He's a convicted rapist and is on the registry for life. He lives in a halfway house and is pretty ducked up in general. Saw on the news a while back he is doing 10 years in prison for raping his mentally disabled sister. I dated the weird kid in middle school, but he moved away and we lost contact. We reconnected when I was in college. He dropped out of high school and was kinda lost in life. He'd gotten 2 girls pregnant and was working 3 jobs to pay child support. He flirted heavily with me when we talked and I decided it wasn't worth the baggage and politely stepped out of his life. Last I heard, he became a skinhead and joined an alt-right faction in Oklahoma. Didn't run into him, but randomly saw a TED talk he gave on YouTube. He's a physicist now, and has been lobbying the government to increase funding for science education in order to ensure future generations can continue the fight against climate change. He's a way better person than I became. Weird kid I knew committed suicide about 6 weeks after we graduated. It's only a couple years out of high school at this point, but one of my good friends is high functioning autistic, and thus was considered very weird in high school. He's found a job stocking the refrigerators at a local supermarket and is enjoying that from what he tells me. He's taking classes on and off at a local university but doesn't know what he wants to go into. He's also getting into writing fanfiction and is continuing his passion for Lego. On a side note, his creations in Lego are super impressive, especially considering his limited resources. She moved to NY City and was one of the stars of a Broadway musical. Weird, but always mad and very strong. My dad sent me a newspaper clipping some years ago. He was around 40 and at a country and western nightclub when 3 men in their 20s jumped him in the parking lot. He then went inside and told the bar owner that he'd been jumped in his parking lot. He then told him to call the police and to make sure an ambulance was called because they were hurt badly. He still wears a black trench coat and his black Napoleon Dynamite boots and trudges around down the streets. I met him at a bus stop. I only managed to say, "Hey, how are you? What are you doing nowadays?" He responded, "I may cat meow meow," and ran away across the road, where he almost got hit by a car in the process. I didn't see him come back to take a bus. I suppose he turned into a furry or something? I'm doing fine and have not murdered anyone. He was a ginger nerd big time. A real Poindexter. Glasses taped together. Pants too short. You know what I'm talking about. At the 15th class reunion, he was the most interesting guy there, and he looked a lot cooler. The football players, on the other hand, were balding and considerably heavier, and most had too much to drink. She was actually doing really well. I almost didn't recognize her because she looked so much different. She joined the military, so was cleaned up, in better shape, etc. and seemed like she was happy. Sadly, she died in a car accident a year or so later. Still weird. Not as weird as in high school when he invited me over to have frozen pizzas and watch Animal Planet, the original Netflix and chill. Eater. He asked every single day in science class, without fail. Then he wiped his boogs on the front of my desk. Dog, most of Reddit is that weird kid. One kid like that died in a car accident senior year. Everyone then pretended they were his best friend and that they were so sad etc. These people basically ducking tortured this kid. Their reactions were disgustingly fake. I never realized how many phony monsters I knew until that happened. Luckily I never had to see those people again soon after. I was a weird kid. The way I would put it is if I were born 10-15 years later, I probably would have been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. I was smart, emotionally precocious, but I had a lot of strange coordination and motor control issues. For me, playing looked like collecting or sorting piles of things from the backyard or lining up my toys in high order. Never had many friends, dressed like a dork, had trouble fitting in. I was awkward, teased, and bullied into late middle school. I grew out of it somehow. I don't really remember there being any process. I like to think that I grew into myself. I've got good social skills. I'm relatively attractive. And people like me still have some weird idiosyncrasies. But I'm cool enough to own them nowadays. My childhood and adolescence still influence a lot of my fears. But overall I'm glad to be who I am now. And growing up was important for that to happen. He became a she and is super happy. It explained a lot. I was happy to find out this girl from middle school with speech issues and was not very attractive got surgery to clip her tongue and wound up developing into a certified smoke show. Ran into her at a bar in college and still to this day can't believe the transformation. My friend's dad told him about weird classmate he had. Nobody really took him seriously. When they were in their last grades, that kid decided that right after school he will be growing fungi instead of studying. Everyone laughed at him, and guess what? Right now he owns probably the largest organic farm business both in the country and most likely in the whole region. There was this kid in junior high that was really quiet and had no friends at the time. One day my English teacher pulls me out of the classroom and asks me to befriend him because he didn't have friends. So I did and we became friends. We went to different high schools so kinda lost connection. He would text me every now and then. He found me on Facebook when he was working on his engineering degree. He is now married and works for SpaceX as an engineer. We had a kid who thought he was a ninja. He even wore the shoes with the split toes. Ended up getting busted talking 12-year-old girls online into 6 at a local park. While awaiting trial was busted by internet vigilantes posing as underage girls going after multiple faked accounts. His trial was on the news quite a bit. About 10 years later there was an expose on conditions at a prison, and he was interviewed working out in the yard. Few years after his release a news crew knocked on his door for one of those pedophiles in your neighborhood do you know where they are segments. One of the kids from back in school has a very nice compilation of all of these segments. My best friend from high school sent me a news article a couple months ago. Apparently this kid we went to school with who was always very odd got busted for trying to take photos of underage girls. Don't remember what was particularly weird about him, just that he never seemed to fit in anywhere. I hope it wasn't that stunted development in high school that led to all this Not years later but I saw the weird kid from school on a bus. The driver came out of his compartment to yell at him for his Opel card not having enough money so he got up to bolt out of his seat and a butt plug fell out of his shorts. So, this was the I don't talk to him unless I want to know the weirded type of dude. He was nice, just very weird and nerdy. He got expelled for bringing a practice butterfly knife to school in the 4th grade. It was a little thing his cousin gave him, and it was unharmful. Nothing sharp, just cool tricks. He went to a school about a mile away, and we didn't see him until freshman year of high school. He turned from the smartest, weirdest kid we knew to a normal popular kid. He was a complete stereotype, and pretended not to remember us. Then, something weird happened. One day, during sex ed, he made a joke that sounded like the old him, albeit a little weirder. I think sex ed snapped something in him, because he got expelled again within a month for sneaking into the girls' locker room, hiding in one of the largest lockers, and peeking out through the ventilation. For that, he was one of those people that would attend feminist marches with their liberal ass girlfriend. Last I heard, he was in juvie for selling codeine. It's been 7 years and he still messages me on Facebook once a week. I haven't spoken to him or replied in 7 years and he sends me paragraphs of text. I see it as a damn game now. Ducking 7 years. WTF Mark. He was still wearing the same hoodie that he had every single day in high school. 5 years after graduation. I don't know what I'd expected but it blew my mind. Just saw a guy who ran with the weird crowd at my school. They were the anime manga type crowd, but I always respected them for doing what they enjoyed. He approached me at the local gym. Very polite, respectful guy always. and I found out he was working and playing in 2 bands. I'm glad he came up to me, and I'm extremely glad he's doing what he loves to do. Let people do what they do, as they'll probably let you do what you love to as well.